In the unforgiving grip of an Alaskan winter, where the temperature plunged to a deadly -30 degrees Fahrenheit, the air was a weapon and the snow an unrelenting prison. Beneath the frost, a rusty tin box lay hidden, its chilling contents a testament to human cruelty. 5 golden retriever puppies, trembling, their tiny bodies frozen stiff. How could anyone abandon them to such brutal conditions? What kind of fate awaited these innocent souls in a world so cold, both in temperature and in heart? The wind howled like a living creature, tearing through the darkened streets of Willow Creek. Snow fell relentlessly, blanketing the small Alaskan town in a suffocating silence. At -30 degrees Fahrenheit, even the strongest souls were forced to retreat indoors, their homes offering the only sanctuary from the brutal cold. But on this frigid night, Amanda Carter, the town's dedicated veterinarian, was still out, trudging through the snow with her flashlight slicing through the darkness. Amanda had received an urgent call about an injured stray dog near the outskirts of town. Wrapped in her heavy parka, fur-lined boots crunching on the snow, she made her way down the quiet, icy streets. The bitter cold bit at her cheeks, her breath forming frosty clouds as she muttered to herself about the harshness of the weather and the cruelty it often brought out in people. She'd seen too many abandoned animals during winters like this, their fragile lives snuffed out by a lack of care and compassion. As she approached the area described in the call, her flashlight caught something unusual. A faint glint, metal weathered and rusty, was barely visible under a mound of freshly fallen snow. Amanda's boots slowed as she stepped closer, her pulse quickening. It was a tin box, partially buried and nearly hidden in the frozen ground. The sight was odd, but it wasn't until she noticed faint paw prints leading away that her stomach dropped. Kneeling in the snow, Amanda brushed away the frost clinging to the edges of the box. Her gloved hands felt the rough, rusted surface as she carefully pried open the lid. The flashlight's beam illuminated the contents, and her heart stopped. Inside were 5 tiny golden retriever puppies, their golden fur frosted with ice. They were huddled together, trembling violently. Their breaths were shallow wisps, barely visible in the freezing air. Amanda's throat tightened as she counted them again. 5. 5 lives, abandoned and left to die in this brutal cold. The puppies were deathly silent, their wide, glassy eyes staring up at her with a mixture of fear and desperation. One of them whimpered softly, a weak sound that sent a jolt of urgency through Amanda's body. Without a second thought, she scooped them up, cradling their frozen bodies close to her chest. They felt stiff, like tiny statues of fur and frost. "Who could do this to you?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Amanda turned on her heel and began the trek back to her clinic. The weight of the tin box and the puppies slowed her down, but she pushed through the biting wind, her boots crunching rhythmically on the icy ground. She couldn't help but glance over her shoulder as though expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. The thought of who might have abandoned these innocent creatures gnawed at her. By the time she burst through the doors of her clinic, her fingers were numb and her cheeks were raw from the cold. The warmth of the building enveloped her, but she barely noticed as she shouted for her assistant. "Lisa! Emergency!" Amanda's voice echoed through the quiet clinic, startling Lisa Bennett, who was organizing supplies in the back room. Lisa rushed out, her blonde hair tied in a messy bun and her eyes widening at the sight before her. "Oh my God, Amanda! Are those puppies?" They were left in a tin box outside. "They're freezing to death. We need to act fast," Amanda said, her breath still fogging the air as she gently laid the puppies on a heated examination table. Lisa didn't hesitate. She grabbed warming blankets and began wrapping each puppy with care. "I'll get the heating pads and IV fluids," she said, her voice tight with urgency. Amanda nodded, her hands already moving with practiced precision. She checked the puppies' pulses, her heart sinking at how faint they were. Their tiny chests rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. She could feel the frost clinging to their fur, the coldness radiating from their fragile bodies. As Lisa set up the IV lines, Amanda examined the puppies more closely. One of them, slightly larger than the rest, had a thin scratch on its neck. Amanda frowned. The scratch wasn't consistent with something caused by the cold or the environment. It was deliberate. Her mind raced as she tried to piece together what had happened. "Lisa, look at this," she said, motioning to the puppy. Lisa leaned over, her brow furrowing. "That doesn't look like a normal injury. You think someone did this?" Amanda clenched her jaw, a mix of anger and sorrow tightening her chest. "I don't know, but I don't like it." The next few hours were a blur of controlled chaos. Amanda and Lisa worked tirelessly to warm the puppies, using heating pads, gentle massages, and warm IV fluids to stabilize their tiny bodies. They monitored every shallow breath, every faint heartbeat, willing the puppies to hold on. One by one, the puppies began to show small signs of life. A twitch of a paw, a faint whimper, a flicker of movement that sent waves of relief through Amanda and Lisa. But it wasn't over. The smallest puppy, barely clinging to life, remained unresponsive. Amanda focused all her efforts on this tiny survivor, her hands steady but her heart aching. "Come on, little one," she murmured. "You're stronger than this." As the hours dragged on, the puppies began to stabilize. Their fur, once stiff with frost, now felt soft and warm under the blankets. Amanda and Lisa exchanged exhausted but hopeful glances, their faces etched with both relief and anger. "They're going to make it," Lisa said softly, brushing a tear from her cheek. Amanda nodded, but remained silent. Her mind kept circling back to the tin box, the deliberate way it had been buried, the scratch on the puppy's neck. Someone had gone out of their way to leave these puppies to die in the harshest conditions imaginable. Why? And who? As the puppies slept soundly in their heated beds, Amanda stood in the quiet of the clinic, staring at the rusted tin box now sitting on a counter. It was an ordinary object, yet it carried a chilling weight. Her fingers traced its edges as her thoughts spiraled. What kind of person could commit such an act? The frozen wilderness of Willow Creek held many secrets, but Amanda was determined that this one wouldn't stay buried. For now, the puppies were safe. But the questions lingering in Amanda's mind refused to be silenced. The warmth of the clinic was a stark contrast to the deadly chill Amanda had just endured. The air, heavy with the faint scent of antiseptic, hummed with urgency as Amanda and Lisa worked frantically over the examination table. The 5 golden retriever puppies, barely clinging to life, lay bundled in blankets, their breaths faint and uneven. Every second felt like a countdown, the spectre of the Alaskan cold still lingering in their fragile bodies. Lisa moved quickly, placing heating pads beneath each puppy and adjusting the room's thermostat. "Their temperatures are dangerously low," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she glanced at Amanda. "If we can't stabilize them soon—" Amanda didn't let her finish. "We will," she said firmly, though her own heart was pounding with doubt. Her hands moved methodically, checking the pulse and respiration of each puppy. Their fur, once frosted and stiff, was slowly softening under the warmth, but the battle was far from over. "Fluids," Amanda said sharply. Lisa nodded, already preparing the IV lines. Amanda focused on the smallest puppy, its tiny frame barely stirring beneath the blanket. It was the weakest of the litter, its shallow breaths almost imperceptible. "Come on, little one," Amanda whispered, her fingers brushing gently over its frostbitten ear. "Stay with me." The room buzzed with activity as the 2 women worked tirelessly. Amanda adjusted oxygen tubes to deliver a steady flow of warm air to the puppy's fragile lungs. The rhythmic hum of the equipment was the only sound, punctuated by the occasional faint whimper from one of the pups. It was a sound Amanda clung to, a sign that at least one of them still had fight left. Lisa approached with the IV setup, her hands steady despite the tension in her expression. "I'll start with the largest one," she said, nodding toward the pup, showing the strongest signs of life. Amanda agreed, her focus never wavering from the smallest puppy in her care. Minutes stretched into an eternity as the pair worked side by side, their movements synchronized by sheer urgency. The larger pups began responding to the warmth and fluids, their shallow breaths becoming slightly more stable. Amanda allowed herself a flicker of hope, but refused to relax. The smallest one, cradled in her hands, remained motionless. "I don't know if this little one is going to make it," Amanda said quietly, her voice tight with emotion. Lisa glanced over, her eyes softening. "Don't give up yet. These pups have already survived so much." Amanda nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I won't." As Amanda adjusted the blankets around the smallest puppy, her fingers brushed against something unusual. She froze, her brow furrowing as she inspected the pup's neck. Beneath its soft fur was a faint but deliberate scratch. It wasn't deep, but it was precise, almost surgical. Amanda's heart sank. "Lisa, come look at this," she said, motioning her assistant over. Lisa leaned in, her blonde hair falling over her shoulder as she examined the mark. "That doesn't look accidental," she said, her voice low. "What could have caused it?" Amanda's mind raced. The scratch was too clean to be from rough play or environmental hazards. It suggested something or someone had interacted with this puppy in a way that didn't feel natural. The tin box, the frozen state of the puppies, and now this? The pieces weren't adding up. "Whoever left these puppies wanted them to suffer," Amanda said bitterly. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implication. Lisa placed a comforting hand on Amanda's shoulder. "First, let's make sure they survive, then we can figure out what really happened." Amanda nodded, but her mind couldn't let go of the questions forming in the back of her head. The deliberate scratch, the isolation of the tin box in the snow. This wasn't just neglect. It was something darker. The hours dragged on as Amanda and Lisa continued their battle against the clock. The clinic, usually a place of calm and routine, had become a war zone of concentrated effort. They wrapped the puppies in additional layers, gently massaged their limbs to restore circulation, and monitored every vital sign. Finally, a breakthrough. One of the puppies stirred, its tiny paw twitching beneath the blanket. A soft whimper escaped its mouth, and Amanda's heart soared. "This one's stabilizing," she said, her voice filled with relief. Lisa grinned, quickly checking the pup's vitals. "Its temperature is rising. We're getting there." The other puppies began to follow suit, their breaths becoming stronger, their bodies warming to life. Amanda felt a surge of hope as she watched the pups begin to fight back against the icy grip of the cold, but her gaze kept returning to the smallest one, still unresponsive. Amanda placed her stethoscope against its tiny chest. The heartbeat was faint, too faint. "We need more fluids. We can't lose this one," she said, her voice firm but strained. Lisa nodded, quickly adjusting the IV flow. "If any of them can pull through, it's because of you," she said, her tone encouraging. Amanda didn't respond. Her focus remained solely on the tiny creature in her hands. She willed it to fight, to survive, to prove that even in the face of the cruelest conditions, life could triumph. By dawn, the clinic was quiet again. The puppies were tucked into makeshift incubators, their fragile bodies finally showing signs of recovery. Amanda and Lisa sat slumped in chairs, their exhaustion evident, but their hearts lighter. "They're not out of the woods yet," Amanda said softly, glancing at the smallest puppy, which was now breathing faintly but steadily. "But they've made it through the worst." Lisa smiled weakly. "That little one's a fighter, just like you." Amanda didn't respond, her thoughts drifting back to the scratch she'd found. Something about it gnawed at her, refusing to let her rest. As much as she wanted to focus solely on their recovery, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The morning sun crept over the snow-draped rooftops of Willow Creek, casting a pale, cold light on the quiet town. Inside Amanda Carter's clinic, the puppies stirred softly in their heated beds, their fragile lives holding onto a tenuous thread of recovery. Amanda, seated at her desk with a steaming cup of coffee, stared at the rusted tin box that had carried them to her doorstep. Its battered surface felt like an accusation, a question that demanded answers. The door to the clinic creaked open, and Police Chief Mark Holden stepped inside. His heavy boots left trails of melting snow on the floor as he removed his hat and nodded at Amanda. "I came as soon as I could," Mark said, his deep voice breaking the silence. "Got your call about the puppies and the box. Figured you'd want to know we found a lead." Amanda set down her coffee, her exhaustion giving way to curiosity. "A lead? That's quick." Mark reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notepad. Turns out, a local grocery store clerk remembered seeing a woman carrying a box matching this description yesterday afternoon. She was struggling with it, looked flustered. Clark said she headed toward the edge of town. Amanda leaned forward. "Do we know who she is?" Mark nodded grimly. "Maggie Collins, single mother, lives in one of the trailers on the outskirts. Times have been hard for her." Amanda frowned. "Hard times don't excuse this. Those puppies were left to die, Mark." "I know," Mark said, his tone firm. "That's why we're paying her a visit." Later that afternoon, Amanda found herself standing outside a weathered trailer, its red paint peeling and its windows fogged over. Mark knocked firmly on the door. After a few moments it creaked open, and a woman appeared. She was thin, her face pale and lined with exhaustion. Her dark hair was tied back messily, and her clothes hung loosely on her frame. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw Mark and Amanda. "Maggie Collins?" Mark asked. "Yes," she replied hesitantly. "We need to talk about the puppies," Mark said, his voice even but stern. Maggie's shoulders slumped, and she stepped aside to let them in. The trailer's interior was cramped and cold, with worn furniture and the faint smell of old coffee lingering in the air. Maggie motioned for them to sit, but Amanda remained standing, her arms crossed tightly. I knew someone would come," Maggie began, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do." Mark nodded, giving her space to explain. "Tell us what happened." Maggie rubbed her hands together nervously, her eyes darting between Mark and Amanda. It's not what it looks like. I didn't want to hurt them. I couldn't. But I didn't have a choice." Amanda's frustration bubbled over. "You didn't have a choice? You left 5 puppies in a tin box in the snow. That's not desperation. That's cruelty." Tears welled in Maggie's eyes, and she looked down at her lap. "I know how it looks. But you don't understand. Their mother, she died. She got sick after giving birth, and I didn't have the money to take her to a vet. I tried to care for her, but she didn't make it." Mark's expression softened slightly, but Amanda remained unmoved. "And the puppies?" Amanda pressed. "Why leave them to freeze to death?" "I didn't know what else to do," Maggie cried, her voice breaking. "I couldn't keep them. I can barely feed my own kids. I thought if I left them somewhere, someone might find them." "Someone might find them," Amanda repeated, her voice rising. "Do you realize how close they were to dying?" Maggie's tears fell freely now, but there was something in her face, a flicker of guilt that didn't fully match her words. Mark noticed it too. "There's more, isn't there?" Mark said, leaning forward. "Maggie, you need to tell us everything. What really happened to the mother dog?" Maggie hesitated, her hands trembling. Finally she whispered, "She didn't just die. I found her in the woods. Something killed her." Amanda and Mark exchanged a look. "What do you mean, something?" Amanda asked cautiously. Maggie shook her head. "I don't know. I heard barking late at night, and when I went to check on her, she was gone. I followed her tracks into the woods, and she was just lying there. There was blood. I couldn't tell if it was an animal or—" She trailed off, her voice choked with fear. "Or what?" Mark prompted. Maggie looked up, her face pale. "Or a person." The room fell silent, the weight of Maggie's words pressing down on them. Amanda's mind raced, piecing together the details: the deliberate scratch on one puppy's neck, the tin box carefully buried in the snow, and now this. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Amanda asked, her tone softening slightly. Maggie wiped her eyes. "Who would I tell? I didn't want to make trouble. I'm barely holding on as it is. I thought if I just got rid of the puppies, I could move on." Mark sighed, scribbling notes in his pad. "We'll need to take a look at where you found her. Can you show us?" Maggie nodded hesitantly. "It's not far from here. Just a short walk into the woods." Amanda glanced at Mark. "We need to go, now." Mark stood, tucking his notepad into his pocket. "Maggie, stay here. We'll be in touch." As Amanda followed Mark out of the trailer, her thoughts churned. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, but the picture they formed was far from clear. One thing was certain: the mother dog's death wasn't natural, and whoever or whatever was responsible, this story was far from over. The woods were eerily silent as Amanda and Mark trudged through the thick snow. The sunlight barely penetrated the canopy of bare, frost-coated trees, casting long shadows across the frozen ground. The cold was biting, even through their heavy coats, and their breaths formed clouds in the frigid air. Maggie had given them detailed directions to the spot where she'd found the mother dog, and the weight of her story hung heavy over them. Amanda's mind raced as she replayed Maggie's words. The mother dog's death wasn't natural. Something or someone had caused it. And now they were about to find out the truth. "This is it," Mark said, his voice breaking the silence as he pointed to a clearing up ahead. Amanda's heart sank as they stepped into the open space. The sight was grim. In the center of the clearing lay the body of the mother dog, her golden fur dusted with frost. Her lifeless form was partially buried in the snow, and even at a distance, Amanda could see the dark stains that marked the ground beneath her. She crouched beside the dog, her gloved hand trembling as she gently brushed the snow away from the body. The injuries were brutal, deep gashes along the sides and neck, far too clean to be the work of another animal. "This wasn't an accident," Amanda said, her voice tight with anger. "These wounds, they're deliberate. A knife or something sharp." Mark knelt beside her, his face grim. "You're sure?" Amanda nodded. "No animal leaves marks like these. Someone did this." Mark scanned the surrounding area, his sharp eyes searching for anything out of place. "If this was deliberate, there might be more here than we realize. Keep looking." Amanda stood and began surveying the clearing, her boots crunching on the frozen ground. She had only taken a few steps when something caught her eye, a glint of metal, partially buried in the snow. She knelt and carefully unearthed the object, holding it up for Mark to see. It was a silver necklace, tarnished with age but still intact. The pendant, engraved with delicate lettering, read, "Second Chance Rescue." "What's that?" Mark asked, stepping closer. "Second Chance Rescue," Amanda said, reading the name aloud. "It's an animal rescue organization, or at least it used to be." Mark frowned. "Used to be?" Amanda nodded, her brow furrowed. "I remember reading about them years ago. They shut down after some kind of scandal. Mistreatment of animals, I think." Mark took the necklace from her, inspecting it closely. "Why would this be here? And what does it have to do with the puppies?" "I don't know," Amanda admitted. "But it's not a coincidence." They continued searching the clearing, the icy wind cutting through the trees as if urging them to hurry. Amanda's eyes scanned the ground for any other clues, her thoughts swirling with possibilities. As she moved closer to the edge of the clearing, something else caught her attention, a small, crumpled piece of paper wedged against the base of a tree. "Mark!" she called out, motioning him over. She carefully picked up the paper, unfolding it with gloved fingers. The handwriting was rough and uneven, as if written in haste. The words sent a chill down her spine. They must not survive. Mark read the note over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. What the hell does that mean? Amanda shook her head, her pulse quickening. It's a warning, or maybe a command. Either way, someone wanted those puppies dead. Mark's expression darkened as he looked around the clearing. This is bigger than we thought. If the mother dog was targeted and the puppies were left to die, someone had a reason for doing this. And I don't think it's over. Amanda and Mark stood in the clearing for a moment, the weight of the discovery pressing down on them. The mother dog, the necklace, the note. Each clue painted a picture that was more sinister than they had anticipated. This isn't just about neglect, Amanda said softly. This is deliberate. Someone wanted those puppies gone. And they were willing to kill the mother to make it happen, Mark added, his voice cold. The question is, why? Amanda glanced at the lifeless body of the mother dog, her heart aching. We need answers, Mark, for her and for those puppies. Mark nodded. We'll take the necklace and the note back to the station. I'll run the name of the rescue organization and see what comes up. In the meantime, keep an eye on those puppies. If someone went to this much trouble to get rid of them, they might not be done. Amanda's stomach churned at the thought. The puppies were safe for now, but for how long? As they turned to leave the clearing, the icy wind seemed to howl louder, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The outskirts of Willow Creek were quiet, the kind of stillness that carried an unnatural weight. Amanda and Mark drove along the narrow, snow-covered road, their breaths fogging up the windows of the police SUV. The destination loomed ahead, a dilapidated house sitting on the edge of the woods, its weathered exterior barely holding up against the Alaskan winter. This is the address connected to the rescue organization, Mark said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The place has been abandoned for years. Locals avoid it, call it cursed. Amanda glanced at him, the tension in the air matching the knots in her stomach. If this is where it all started, we'll find something. The SUV came to a stop, its tires crunching on the frozen gravel. The house was a ghostly silhouette against the grey sky, its windows shattered and the roof sagging under the weight of snow. Amanda and Mark stepped out, their boots sinking into the snow as they approached the front door. The inside of the house was worse than they expected. The air was damp and cold, carrying a faint, unpleasant smell of mildew and decay. The floor creaked under their weight and graffiti lined the walls, some of it crude, others cryptic. It doesn't look like anyone's been here in a while, Amanda said, her voice low. Mark scanned the room, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. Let's split up. Look for anything that ties this place to Second Chance Rescue. Amanda nodded and moved cautiously through the house, her steps deliberate. The living room was empty except for broken furniture and shards of glass scattered across the floor. As she moved deeper into the house, she found a door slightly ajar, leading to the basement. She hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open. A narrow staircase led downward, the steps creaking ominously. Amanda descended slowly, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. When she reached the bottom, her flashlight revealed a small, cluttered space, an old filing cabinet, stacks of yellowed papers, and cages. Amanda's breath caught. The cages were rusted and empty now, but the sight of them was enough to confirm her worst fears. "Mark!" Amanda shouted, her voice echoing through the house. Mark was by her side in moments, his flashlight sweeping over the basement. His expression darkened when he saw the cages. "Animal cages," he muttered. "This place wasn't a rescue. It was a prison." Amanda moved to the filing cabinet, pulling it open. Inside were old documents, many of them stamped with the Second Chance Rescue logo. She sifted through them quickly, her gloved hands trembling as she uncovered the truth. Records of animals brought to the facility, notes about treatments and invoices for equipment. But there were also complaints, reports of neglect, abuse, and unexplained disappearances of animals. "This organization wasn't saving animals," Amanda said, her voice thick with anger. "They were exploiting them." Mark's jaw tightened. "And when the truth came out, they shut down. But why target the mother dog and her puppies now?" Amanda's gaze fell to a crumpled piece of paper tucked behind the cabinet. She pulled it out and smoothed it on the table. It was a handwritten note, similar to the one they'd found in the forest. The message was brief, but chilling. "No one can know. End it." The weight of the discovery pressed down on them as they emerged from the basement. Mark's phone buzzed, breaking the silence. He stepped aside to answer, leaving Amanda to process what they'd found. As she stood in the derelict house, her thoughts racing, her own phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out, her brow furrowing at the sight of an unknown number. Cautiously, she answered. "Hello?" she said. There was a pause, then a voice, distorted, mechanical, and devoid of emotion. "Stop asking questions." Amanda froze. "Who is this?" "You don't want to know what happens if you keep digging," the voice continued. "Stay out of it, or you'll regret it." The line went dead. Amanda's hands trembled as she lowered the phone. Mark returned, noticing her pale face. "What's wrong?" "I just got a call," she said, her voice shaking. "Someone threatened me. They know we're investigating." Mark's eyes narrowed, his protective instincts kicking in. "You need to be careful. Whoever's behind this doesn't want the truth coming out." Amanda nodded, but her resolve hardened. "That just means we're close. I'm not backing down." They left the house with the evidence they'd uncovered, their minds heavy with unanswered questions. The truth about Second Chance Rescue was darker than they'd imagined, and the connection to the mother dog and her puppies was becoming clearer. As they drove back to the clinic, Amanda glanced at the puppies, now safe and recovering under Lisa's care. Whatever darkness surrounded their story, Amanda was determined to protect them, and to find justice for the mother who had died trying to keep them safe. But as the snow began to fall once more, Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The small town of Willow Creek buzzed with activity as word spread about the investigation into the abandoned puppies. For weeks, Amanda Carter had worked tirelessly alongside Police Chief Mark Holden, piecing together the clues that pointed to something much larger than a single act of cruelty. The mother dog's death, the cryptic notes, and the disturbing evidence found in the abandoned house had painted a chilling picture. And now, finally, the pieces were falling into place. It was early morning when the breakthrough came. Amanda was at the clinic checking on the puppies when her phone rang. Mark's voice on the other end was resolute. "We've got them," he said. "Who?" Amanda asked, her heart pounding. "The person behind this whole mess," Mark replied. "It's connected to the old Second Chance Rescue group. Someone from the organization stayed in town after it shut down. We're making the arrest now." Amanda felt a mix of relief and anger as she hung up. Whoever had caused this pain was finally going to face justice. She turned to Lisa, who was cleaning the puppy's enclosure. "They caught someone," Amanda said. Lisa's eyes widened. "Who?" "I don't know yet, but it's connected to the rescue organization," Amanda said, her voice firm. "We'll find out soon enough." Later that day, Amanda met Mark at the police station. He ushered her into a briefing room where files and photos were spread out on a table. At the center of it all was a name, Victor Grant, a former administrator at Second Chance Rescue. "Victor stayed in town after the rescue shut down," Mark explained. "He's been operating under the radar, running illegal breeding operations and selling animals through underground networks. The mother dog and her puppies were likely part of his scheme." Amanda's stomach turned as Mark laid out the details. Victor had used the abandoned house as a staging area, keeping animals there until they were transported elsewhere. The mother dog had probably escaped, giving birth in the wild before being tracked down and killed. "He abandoned the puppies because they were a liability," Mark continued. "Too much risk for too little reward." Amanda's hands balled into fists. So he just left them to die? Mark nodded. But thanks to you, they didn't. And now we have enough evidence to shut him down for good. While Victor's arrest brought some closure, Amanda couldn't shake the memory of Maggie Collins, the single mother who had tried to care for the puppies before abandoning them. Maggie's story was one of desperation, but it was also one of failure, a failure Amanda believed could be redeemed. A few days after the arrest, Maggie showed up at the clinic. She looked different, still tired, but there was a determination in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I want to help," Maggie said, her voice steady. "I know what I did was wrong. I can't take it back, but I can try to make it right." Amanda studied her for a moment before nodding. "If you're serious, we could use the help." Maggie began volunteering at the clinic, starting with simple tasks like cleaning and organizing supplies. Over time, Amanda noticed a change in her. Maggie was gentle with the animals, her remorse evident in the care she gave them. She often spent extra time with the puppies, whispering soft words of encouragement as they recovered. One evening, as they cleaned the enclosures together, Maggie finally opened up. "I didn't think anyone would find them," she said quietly. "I thought I was doing what was best. But when I see them now, I realize I was just giving up." Amanda placed a hand on her shoulder. "What matters is that you're here now. They survived because of the choices we made after, and so will you." Under Amanda's care, the puppies thrived. Their golden fur grew soft and thick, their once frail bodies becoming stronger with each passing day. Lisa and Maggie helped Amanda feed them, clean their enclosures, and even play with them to build their confidence. Each puppy developed its own personality. The smallest one, nicknamed Hope, was timid but incredibly loving. Faith, the largest of the litter, had a bold, adventurous spirit. Joy lived up to her name, constantly wagging her tail and seeking cuddles. Grace was gentle and calm, often sitting quietly beside whoever needed comfort. Lucky, the most resilient, loved to explore and seemed fearless despite everything they had endured. One by one, Amanda began searching for homes for the puppies. She was meticulous in her process, ensuring each adopter understood the responsibility and commitment required. The community of Willow Creek rallied around her efforts, and soon families began coming forward. Hope was the first to be adopted. An elderly couple who had recently lost their own dog fell in love with her quiet, affectionate nature. Amanda watched as the couple cradled Hope, their smiles lighting up the clinic. "She's perfect," the woman said, tears in her eyes. Next was Faith, whose boundless energy caught the attention of a family with 2 young children. The kids laughed as Faith eagerly chased a ball around the clinic, her playful antics filling the room with joy. Joy went to a young couple who immediately bonded with her sweet, cheerful demeanor. Grace, with her calming presence, was adopted by a local therapist who planned to train her as a therapy dog for patients in need of comfort. Finally, Lucky found a home with a firefighter who admired the puppy's resilience and courage. As Amanda watched him carry Lucky out of the clinic, she felt a bittersweet sense of pride. "They've all found their families," Lisa said, standing beside Amanda. "You did it." "We did it," Amanda corrected, smiling softly. "They're safe now. That's all that matters." With the puppies in loving homes and Victor Grant behind bars, life in Willow Creek began to return to normal. The clinic, once a quiet sanctuary, had become a hub of activity and hope. Maggie continued to volunteer, her confidence growing with each passing day. She even started taking classes to pursue a career in animal care. One evening, as the sun set over the snow-covered town, Amanda sat in her office, reflecting on everything that had happened. The tin box that had once held 5 tiny lives sat on a shelf, a reminder of how far they had come. Mark stopped by, leaning against the doorframe. "Thought I'd check in. How's everything here?" "Good," Amanda said, smiling. "The puppies are thriving. Maggie's finding her footing and the clinic's busier than ever." Mark nodded. You did a lot of good, Amanda. Not just for the puppies, but for the whole town. Amanda looked out the window, the warmth of the clinic contrasting with the cold darkness outside. They deserved a second chance. So did Maggie, and so does everyone who's willing to fight for it. Months later, Amanda received updates from the families who had adopted the puppies. Pictures filled her inbox. Hope snuggled on a couch with her elderly owners, Faith bounding through a snowy forest with the children, Joy curled up with her new family, Grace bringing comfort to patients, and Lucky proudly sitting beside the firefighter who had become his best friend. Each photo was a testament to the resilience of life and the power of compassion. The puppies, once left to die in the cold, now thrived in the warmth of loving homes. As Amanda closed her laptop and turned off the clinic lights for the night, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been worth every moment. Together, they had turned a story of cruelty and despair into one of justice and redemption, a reminder that even in the harshest winters, hope could still bloom.